3 months. 92 days. From a multi-year decline in property crime, through a record number of adults in New South Wales prisons, to a Sunday evening at Bondi Beach in December that became Australia's worst mass shooting in nearly 3 decades, Q4 of 2025 in Sydney and New South Wales. In this episode, the BOCSAR crime statistics for the year to December 2025, what went up, what went down, and what NSW Police themselves flagged. The deadliest year on New South Wales roads in 8 years. A Hanukkah celebration at Bondi Beach that became a national emergency. 3 measles cases in Sydney. A historic parliamentary inquiry into half a century of unsolved murders. And housing, Sydney's median home value passed $1.25 million, vacancy rates under 2%. Let's begin where these summaries always begin, with the most serious losses. The NSW Bureau of Crime Statistics and Research, BOCSAR, publishes its recorded crime statistics quarterly. The most recent release covers the year ending December 2025. For murder, the count was 82. 8 fewer than the previous year, but BOCSAR's trend test rates the change statistically stable. The previous year was elevated in part by the April 2024 Westfield Bondi Junction stabbing, which alone accounted for 6 victims. Across all homicide-related categories combined, murder, attempted murder, manslaughter, and accessory, the rolling year count fell from 120 to 107. One event dominated the quarter. On the evening of Sunday the 14th of December, at around 20 to 7, a Hanukkah celebration was underway at Archer Park, Bondi Beach. Around 1,000 people had gathered. Over the next 6 minutes, 2 gunmen, a father and son, opened fire on the crowd. 15 people were killed. 11 men, 3 women, and a 10-year-old girl. 41 were injured. 4 civilians physically confronted the gunmen. 3 of those 4 were among the 15 killed. NSW Police shot both attackers. The father died at the scene, the son was wounded and arrested. If you are watching this and were directly affected, the resources on screen will remain visible for the rest of this segment. The surviving attacker, 24 years old, from Bondi, was charged within 3 days. 15 counts of murder. 40 of attempted murder. Committing a terrorist act. Firearm and explosive offences. 59 charges in total. He is on remand at Goulburn Correctional Centre. Islamic State claimed credit for the attack. By the end of December, NSW Police had concluded the pair acted alone, with no evidence of a wider militant cell. The response built within 48 hours. Almost 50,000 people booked blood donations on the Monday, more than double the previous national record. The Sydney Opera House sales were lit with a projected menorah that evening. 5 days after the attack, the Prime Minister announced a national gun buyback, the first since 1996. And by Christmas Eve, the NSW Parliament had passed sweeping organised crime reforms: kill cars, public shootings, bail. Bondi Beach was the dominant single event of the quarter, but the rolling year homicide total of 107 is made of dozens of individual stories. 10 of them, every incident from this calendar year, told briefly. At 10:30 on a Thursday night in April, a group of armed men forced their way through the front door of a home in Bankstown, in Sydney's southwest. An 8-year-old boy was inside. They struck him with a baseball bat. They then took the boy's mother, 45-year-old Kim Tran, out of the house at gunpoint. NSW Police's case under Strikeforce Bushfield is that Ms. Tran was kidnapped because of her husband's alleged ties to an organised criminal network based in Victoria. A second crew waited at a rural property in Victoria that same night, intending to kill him. When he didn't appear, the Sydney crew killed Ms Tran. 6 people have been charged across the joint criminal enterprise. John Versace was 23 years old. Just after 10:30 at night on the 19th of May, he was shot at a home on Dalton Street, Condell Park, in Sydney's southwest. He died at the scene. NSW Police alleged the shooter had been hired to kill someone else entirely, and that John was misidentified, wrong place, wrong time. He had no significant criminal record. The case opened as Strike Force Harkstead, then continued under Task Force Falcon when that was stood up days later. A 43-year-old man was arrested at Casula in November. Investigations continue. At 5:10 on a Sunday afternoon in late May, Dawood Zachariah, 32, was in a Toyota Hilux turning onto Woodville Road in Granville, in Sydney's west. A Mercedes pulled up alongside. Multiple rounds were fired into the ute. Dawood was hit. So was the 25-year-old driver. 2 other men in the vehicle were unhurt. Both injured men were taken to hospital. Dawood died there. The case opened as Strike Force Reno. Days later, with public place shootings escalating across Sydney since Christmas, NSW Police stood up Task Force Falcon, a 150-officer joint operation. Multiple arrests under Task Force Falcon have followed. In Wagga Wagga, in the Riverina, just before 8 on a Monday morning, the working week beginning, a 37-year-old man was shot dead in his own street. Connerton Avenue, the suburb of Ashmont. Strike Force Servetters was established the same day. Within 4 days, 2 arrests. A 35-year-old man at Narrandera, and a 28-year-old woman as an accessory before the fact. A third arrest came a month later, a 23-year-old pulled over by detectives on the Olympic Highway. 3 people before the courts. Just past 10 at night on the 27th of August, at the bus interchange on North Parade in Mount Druitt, one of the busiest transit points in Western Sydney, 2 19-year-old men were involved in a violent altercation. One was stabbed. He died at the scene. The other was taken to hospital. The investigation runs under Strike Force Coberta, led by the State Crime Command's Homicide Squad. The wider context: persistent youth violence in Western Sydney, against a backdrop of high unemployment and pressure on community services. On the New South Wales Northern Rivers in September, a 29-year-old man from Mullumbimby was charged with the murder of a woman he knew. The relationship was domestic. He was refused bail. The case is one of the 35 domestic violence-related murder victims recorded across NSW in the 12 months to September 2025, 16 of them adult women, 11 adult men, and 8 children. Domestic violence-related murders make up close to half of all NSW murders in any given year. Behind every line in the BOCSAR tables is a person. At 2 in the morning on the 6th of October, in a park on East Street in the south coast town of Bega, police were called to a concern for welfare. They found a 43-year-old man with stab wounds. He died at the scene. A second man, 45, was also stabbed, but survived. Bega is not a town that sees incidents like this, population around 5,000. Strike Force Naxton, working with the Homicide Squad, charged 6 people over the following weeks, 4 men aged from 29 to 48, and a 19-year-old woman. In the Hunter Valley, on a Friday night in late October, Rukia Lake, a young mother, was shot dead inside her own home near Cessnock. A distressed family member walked 300 or 400 meters from the house and flagged down passing motorists. Police arrived to find Rukia dead. The accused, 37-year-old Christopher McLaughlin, was not at the scene. Strike Force Keyville was established and a manhunt launched. He was located in the days that followed. The Hunter Valley Police commander called domestic violence a blight on our community. A second DV-related case for the section, and not the last for the calendar year. At 4:20 in the afternoon on Monday the 24th of November, emergency services were called to Bruce Purser Reserve on Macquarie Street, Rouse Hill, in Sydney's northwest. A 17-year-old boy lay on the grass with a stab wound to his leg. He died at the scene. The investigation, Strikeforce Crawton, has charged 3 15-year-old boys with murder over the following weeks. The youth violence cases that bookended Q4, Mount Druitt in August, Rouse Hill in November, are part of a broader western and northwestern Sydney pattern that police and education authorities have flagged with growing concern. Around 10 to 12 in the morning on the 28th of November, late in Q4, a 28-year-old man was gunned down on Macquarie Street, Blacktown, in Sydney's west. He was shot in the neck, chest and leg. Paramedics worked on him at the curb. He died at the scene. The shooting happened less than 500 meters from Blacktown Police Station. Officers inside heard the gunshots and ran. A Mazda utility was seen leaving. A 5-minute pursuit ended in a crash on Kildare Road. An 18-year-old and a 25-year-old were arrested as they tried to run from the wreckage. Both have since been charged with murder. Among the 13 major offence categories BOCSAR tracks, only 2 rose significantly over the 2 years to December. The first, sexual assault. Up 7.9% over the rolling year to December, from 11,981 offences to 12,925. This is the longest-running upward trend in NSW recorded crime. Over the 10 years to 2025, sexual assault reports have risen an average of 10.5% every year, a cumulative 145% rise over the decade. BOCSAR's stated position. The Bureau says much of the short and long-term increase is driven by greater willingness to report, that is, by victims coming forward who in previous years would not have. National benchmark from the most recent ABS figures. A victimization rate of 227.1 per 100,000 women, and 43.1 per 100,000 men. 49% of recorded victims were under 18. If this segment touches something you're experiencing, the resources on screen are available now and after this video. The broader assault and property crime picture in New South Wales was mixed, with the BOCSAR test rating most categories statistically stable. Domestic violence-related assault fell numerically, from 38,325 to 37,828, but the trend test rated the change stable. Non-domestic violence-related assault fell 4%. Assaults on police, stable at 2,643, a very different picture to South Australia, where assaults on police rose 22% in the same window. Robbery fell 9%, from 1,976 offences to 1,799. Burglary moved with it. Break and enter on dwellings fell numerically from 19,416 to 18,136, though the BOCSAR test rates that change stable. Break and enter on non-dwellings, burglary of businesses, sheds, garages, fell 8.2%, the largest property crime decline by trend test. Intimidation, stalking and harassment was statistically stable, at just under 50,000 offences for the year. One category to watch, coercive control. The new offence, which took effect on the 1st of July 2024, recorded 326 incidents in the year to December 2025, up from 147 in the prior part year. BOCSAR can't yet calculate a 2-year trend, the offence is too new. But what moved most clearly in the year to December was not the offending, it was the prosecution. Adult court proceedings rose 7.9%, from 159,803 matters to 172,466. The largest single increase by offence type. Intimidation, stalking and harassment, 1,575 more matters brought to court. BOCSAR attributes around one-third of the entire increase in adult court proceedings to domestic violence legal actions, which rose 9.8% across the year. Breaches of apprehended violence orders alone rose 4.5%, from 26,000 to 27,500. And in custody, as at March 2026, New South Wales had a record 14,070 adults in prison, the highest count BOCSAR has ever reported. The system was, in plain terms, more full than it has ever been. The next section covers suicide as a category of cause of death. I won't be naming individuals, describing methods, or detailing specific incidents. If this isn't something you can engage with right now, the chapter marker shows you where it ends. New South Wales operates one of 3 real-time state-level suicide monitoring systems in Australia, along with Victoria and Queensland. The most recent finalised national figures come from the Australian Bureau of Statistics Causes of Death release, with data through 2024. Nationally, that release recorded 3,307 deaths by suicide. The age standardized rate, 11.8 per 100,000. Suicide was the 16th leading cause of death overall, but the leading cause of premature mortality, more than 107,000 years of life lost. 3/4 of those who died, 76.5%, were male. Specific New South Wales fourth quarter 2025 figures from the NSW suicide monitoring system were not in the public release window at production time. These resources are recommended by every major Australian suicide prevention body. Lifeline is staffed 24 hours a day. 13 Yarn is staffed by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander crisis supporters. They're free to call. If it's heavy right now, those numbers connect to someone trained to listen. "355 people died on New South Wales roads in 2025. 28 more than in 2024. The worst calendar year road toll in New South Wales in 8 years. The fourth quarter alone, October, November and December, accounted for roughly 90 of those deaths, with November the worst single month at 36. October took 27, December, 27. Speed was the leading contributing factor, implicated in 134 deaths, almost 4 in 10. Country roads, though they carry a minority of New South Wales's traffic, claimed 101 of the 355 lives lost, and more than half of those occurred in zones rated at 100 or 110 km an hour. 2 demographics worth singling out. Motorcyclist deaths rose to 75, up from 68 a year earlier. And cyclist deaths tripled, 15 riders killed across the year, including 3 on e-bikes. Geographically, the toll skewed regional. The mid-north coast led the state with 19 deaths. Across the Hunter, Newcastle, Lake Macquarie and Port Stephens region, 8 local government areas combined, 30 deaths were recorded, more than 8% of the entire state's toll. Singleton alone lost 8 people on its roads. Newcastle, 7. Cessnock, 7. The Upper Hunter, 4. By contrast, Dungog recorded none. The Minns government called on the state's 6.4 million drivers and riders, in a release in early January, to make safer choices. The Road Legislation Amendment Speed Limits Bill 2025 had been introduced into NSW Parliament in November by the Greens. Debate has carried into 2026. Safe Work New South Wales, newly established as an independent regulator on the 1st of July 2025, has published its regulatory priorities for the year ahead. The agency's own internal baseline: between 2019 and 2023, 274 workers died in New South Wales workplaces. Falls from heights were the single largest mechanism, 36 of those deaths. Nationally, the most recent finalised year, 2024, recorded 188 worker traumatic injury deaths across Australia. As the country's most populous state, New South Wales typically accounts for roughly a third of national workplace deaths each year. Safe Work NSW's regulatory priorities for 2025-26 are falls from heights, harms to workers in the healthcare and social assistance sector, psychosocial risks at work, including sexual harassment, exposure to hazardous substances like asbestos and crystalline silica, and injuries from mobile plant and machinery. The most positive part of the BOCSAR release was property crime, which continued a multi-year decline. Break and enter on a dwelling, down numerically from 19,416 to 18,136, though the BOCSAR trend test rated it stable. Break and enter on non-dwellings down 8.2%. Steal from a motor vehicle down 6%. Steal from person down 9%. Fraud, the headline figure, down 12% year-on-year, the largest single decline in any category. But not retail. Shoplifting rose 9.3% statewide, from 28,272 offences to 30,900. The rise was almost entirely concentrated in Greater Sydney, which was up 13.5%. Regional New South Wales was stable. The most commonly shoplifted item in New South Wales in 2025 was BOCSAR records, liquor. Industry attributes the rise to a combination of cost of living pressures and organised retail crime networks specifically targeting alcohol. New South Wales Police responds to roughly 30,000 missing person reports each year, about 6 times the volume that South Australia handles. As elsewhere in Australia, the vast majority are resolved quickly, with a phone call to a relieved family. But for some cases, decades pass. On the 1st of December, well inside Q4, the New South Wales Parliament's Portfolio Committee No. 1 commenced a formal inquiry into unsolved murders and long-term missing persons cases in New South Wales between 1965 and 2010. The committee will look at case clusters, and possible links between them, in the Southern Highlands, Inner Sydney, Newcastle, and the North Coast. It will examine the progress of cold case investigations including Task Force Fennec. And it will look at current and emerging practice in cold case investigation, including the application of newer forensic technologies. The chair, Jeremy Buckingham, called the inquiry long overdue. Submissions close on the 1st of April 2026. Three measles alerts were issued in Sydney across the quarter, and the cases would continue to build through the new year. New South Wales Health publicly recorded 27 measles cases between the 1st of December 2025 and the 22nd of February. The first alert came on the 13th of November. A confirmed case originating from Queensland had been infectious while visiting Sydney between the 8th and 10th of November. Exposure sites included the Oasis concert at Accor Stadium on Saturday the 8th, Sydney Airport, sites across the Sydney CBD and Inner West, and several train trips. The second alert came on the 12th of December. A case had returned from Southeast Asia. Exposure sites this time included Sydney Metro and T4 train trips between Macquarie University and Edgecliff stations, Gran Torino Restaurant in Double Bay, and Macquarie Centre Food Court. And the third case was notified after Christmas. Exposure sites including a train from Thornley, Story Park Playground in Asquith, and Hornsby Koo Ring Gai Hospital's emergency department on New Year's Eve. NSW Health's advice didn't change between cases. If you weren't fully immunized and were at any of those locations, watch for symptoms, and call ahead before any visit to a doctor or emergency department, to prevent further transmission. The dominant illegal trafficking story in New South Wales for the quarter, separately from the Bondi Beach investigation, was a sequence of NSW Police strike forces targeting organised crime networks. On the 29th of October, Strike Force Dartnell charged 3 people after a Sydney operation seized firearms and drugs. The same day, NSW Police issued an appeal for the public's help locating 18 further people wanted on warrants under Strikeforce Sentinel. Separately, 3 men aged 18, 19 and 26 were intercepted by a tactical operations unit on River Road in Revesby, in Sydney's southwest, allegedly as they were on their way to carry out a contract killing near a daycare centre in Condell Park. 2 firearms, balaclavas, body-worn cameras, and jerry cans of fuel were recovered from the vehicles. A 3rd firearm was seized later. All 3 were charged with conspiracy to commit murder and participating in a criminal group. Assistant Commissioner Scott Cook, New South Wales State Crime Commander, described the arrest as a calculated and coordinated intervention that stopped what police will allege was a planned killing nearby a daycare centre. On the 19th of March, outside the quarter, but the first ABS release with September quarter data, the Australian Bureau of Statistics published its national population estimates for the end of September 2025. New South Wales, 8,624,500 people. Year-on-year growth of 1.2%, an increase of just over 105,000 people. That is the 4th slowest growth rate of any state or territory, behind the national average of 1.6%. The composition tells the more interesting story. Sydney is, and is projected to remain, the largest single destination for overseas migrants in Australia. But it consistently loses residents on net to other states, and the September quarter recorded the largest net loss from capital cities to internal migration ever recorded, almost 12,000 people. Within New South Wales, rest of state is gaining, Sydney is losing. Looking ahead, the Centre for Population projects New South Wales will add roughly 1 million more people by 2034, with 2/3 of those, 650,000, in Sydney itself. Population growth has to live somewhere, and in Sydney, that has run headlong into the most stretched housing market in the country. The median dwelling value in Sydney at the end of December, Cotality's measure, was $1.27 million. Up 8.2% across 2025. The Sydney rental market was tighter still, vacancy at 1.8% at year's end, well below the 2.5% that defines a balanced market. Median weekly house rent in Sydney, October data, $1,091. Median weekly unit rent, $721. Sydney remains the most expensive rental market in Australia. The NSW government's response in 2025 was, by historical standards, substantial, a $6.6 billion Building Homes for NSW program, targeting 30,000 new homes. The mid-year budget review committed $111.5 billion to infrastructure across 4 years. Tenant reforms commenced on the 19th of May, ending no grounds evictions, capping rent increases to once a year, allowing pets by default. What the housing market looks like on the ground, from the NSW budget's own background paper, the share of average household earnings spent on a median new mortgage payment has nearly doubled in 4 years, from 17.1% in late 2020 to 31% in late 2024. Median advertised rents have risen 41% in the same window. The share of household earnings going to rent, 25%, up from 20%. Sydney's structural vacancy is forecast, by CBRE, to fall further to 1.2% by 2030 unless apartment completions more than double. The next hard count of homelessness in New South Wales comes with the 11th of August 2026 census. By Christmas Eve, the New South Wales Parliament had passed the Crimes Legislation Amendment Organised and Gang-Related Crime Reforms Bill 2026, a package of reforms drafted in the 10 days after the Bondi beach shooting. The headline measure, A new aggravated offence specifically targeting the use of so-called kill cars, vehicles used to facilitate organised criminal activity and then torched to destroy evidence. Tougher penalties were attached to public shootings, firebombings and the recruitment of children for criminal activity. Bail reform allows courts to take an accused person's organised crime links into account when granting or refusing bail. Authorities now have up to 5 years, rather than 1, to seek forfeiture of assets held by people subject to drug trafficker declarations. Alongside the organised crime package, the Parliament passed reforms strengthening anti-Nazi laws and protections for LGBTQIA+ people in New South Wales. Soon after, in early 2026, the abolition of good character as a mitigating factor at sentencing followed. Premier Chris Minns, Police Minister Yasmin Catley, and Attorney General Michael Daly fronted the press conference on the 24th of December. The second piece of New South Wales parliamentary business worth flagging from this quarter is the one that will play out across 2026. On the 1st of December, Portfolio Committee No. 1, Premier and Finance, commenced a formal inquiry into unsolved murders and long-term missing persons cases between 1965 and 2010. The committee will look at clusters and possible links across the Southern Highlands, Inner Sydney, Newcastle, and the North Coast, areas where investigators have suggested for decades that some cases may share connections never publicly established. It will examine Task Force Fennec and current technology in cold case investigation. Submissions to the inquiry close on the 1st of April. For families who have waited in some cases more than half a century, this is the first formal venue for them to be heard, and for what police did and didn't do to be examined on the parliamentary record. Mount Panorama Bathurst hosted the 2025 Repco Bathurst 1000 from the 10th to the 12th of October, a routine running of the Supercars Classic, no abnormal incidents in the public record. The Sydney to Hobart yacht race left Sydney Harbour on Boxing Day. The Sydney Cricket Ground hosted New Year's Eve fireworks at 9 and midnight, with an elevated New South Wales police and counter-terrorism presence in the wake of the events 17 days earlier. The cultural calendar held, with one quiet asterisk, large public events in Sydney through the back half of December were each separately reviewed for their security posture in the aftermath of Bondi Beach. None were cancelled. Pulling the BOCSAR rolling year numbers together, as they stood at the December 2025 release. Property crime, easing. Break and enter on dwellings down numerically, though rated stable. Non-dwelling break-ins down 8%. Steal from motor vehicle down 6%. Robbery down 9%. Fraud down 12%. Homicide, statistically stable at 82 murders, down from 90. The previous year was elevated by the Westfield Bondi Junction stabbing. This year, by the Bondi Beach shooting on the 14th of December. Both events sit inside the rolling totals. Trending up. Sexual assault, up 8% over the rolling year, and up 10.5% every year over the past decade, on average. BOCSAR attributes most of the long-term rise to greater willingness to report. Shoplifting up 9% statewide and 13.5% in Greater Sydney. Adult court proceedings up 8%, and the prison system at a record 14,070 adults in March 2026. The road toll for 2025, 355, the worst calendar year toll in New South Wales in 8 years. One quarter that began as a property crime story and ended as a story about terror, response, and reform. This summary drew on data published by the New South Wales Bureau of Crime Statistics and Research, the New South Wales Police Force, Transport for New South Wales Health, Safe Work NSW, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, Safe Work Australia, and the New South Wales Premier's Office, and reporting from the ABC, the Sydney Morning Herald, the Australian Associated Press, Reuters, The Guardian, and others. If anything in this video has affected you, the support lines on screen are available. Thank you for watching. The next episode will follow when BOCSAR publishes the March 2026 quarterly update, expected on the 18th of June.